This morning, his mother called me, in tears. Dominic and I have been dating for a little over 5 years, and we have been engaged for the past 8 months. We met at a housewarming party through mutual acquaintances, just two folks who got along because they disliked IPAs and liked 90s cartoons. After dating for a year, moving in after 2, adopting beans at 3, and getting engaged last summer, our relationship progressed. Simple proposal, Saturday morning hike to our favorite vista, where he eagerly removed the ring box from his pocket. Yes, I said. We quickly chose October and have been preparing everything. Mostly me. While he nods, Dominic started making odd statements while arranging our wedding 3 months ago. Before we continue with today's story, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me keep sharing these inspiring tales that touch your day. Thank you for your support. Uncertain, not negative. When I showed him various places, he'd say, "That's a lot of money for just one day. Or do we really need to invite all those people?" I ignored it as male behavior or economic concerns. Later, my wedding texts were answered late when I sent him caterer options. He'd reply hours later with "looks fine" or "whatever you want." When I asked if everything was well, he'd say he was busy at work. His construction company had some big projects. Last month, he spent more time with coworker Paul. They had beers or watched games at Paul's house after work. Again, nothing special, but more often, he seemed distant when he got home, checking his phone more and paying less attention. I tried to tell my best friend Lena. She suggested a date night to bond over pre-wedding worries. Last Friday, I made reservations at a new Italian restaurant downtown. Wore a nice dress, not something fancy, just something I hadn't worn in a while, and bought Dominic's favorite beer to keep in the fridge. Date night failed. He barely spoke during supper. He revealed that he wasn't sure he was ready when I mentioned finalizing our honeymoon plans. Everything from honeymoon to wedding and marriage. Shocked. He was uncertain. After 5 years together and 8 months engaged, he recalled talking to Paul about how marriage changes things and mentioned Paul's brother's terrible divorce when I asked. As the conversation grew, I tried not to make a noise in the restaurant while feeling like my life was falling apart. We barely touched our entrees. Silence and tension permeated the ride home. He avoided talking at our apartment, saying he wanted time to think before sleeping on the couch. The next morning was awful. We navigated a shared Airbnb like strangers. He suggested lunch with Paul and coworkers in downtown sports bar The Rusty Nail, and watched the game too emotionally exhausted to protest. A few hours later, Lena called to tell me to leave the flat. We had coffee, and I unpacked everything. Lena listened intently, suggesting that Dominic was worried about the wedding. I usually decompress by wandering Target after coffee. I bought useless throw pillows and shampoo because retail therapy is therapy, right? By early evening, I was relaxed and went home. Kyler, Dominic's coworker whom I met at the business Christmas party, texted me as I drove into our apartment complex. The message inquired about my well-being and noted that the Rusty Nail had gotten strange. I called Kyler instead of messaging. He was initially hesitant to talk, but after some coaxing, he did. The boys had been bugging Dominic about wedding plans, and when Paul asked if he was ready to be with one woman forever, Dominic expressed doubts. Dominic, evidently drunk, said if you were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying you. Paul asked him what was holding him back, and Dominic laughed. Kyler told me he and other guys confronted Dominic about the comment, but Dominic got defensive and said they couldn't take a joke. I cried for 20 minutes in my car after that call. The man I loved for 5 years, whom I believe loved me, joked about my appearance as a reason he wasn't ready to marry me. Dominic was asleep on the couch as I entered, still in his clothes. The place reeked of old beer. I locked beans in the bedroom. I smelled Dominic's apology meal, coffee, and bacon on Sunday morning. He looked hungover and sheepish, like food would fix everything. I told him what Kyler told me, and his face dropped. He claimed ignorance and inebriation to lessen the situation. He said he murmured something dumb to stop the boys from taunting him for being strapped down. He exacerbated guys being guys by supporting them. We discussed him humiliating me in front of his friends, but he denied that was his goal. He said that he was worried about wedding costs and pressure, but I couldn't get over how he exploited my beauty as a cruel joke. I couldn't stay at his flat. I took my hand back to Elliot's apartment. My brother has always been my refuge in tough times. When I told him what had happened, he was furious and ready to face Dominic. I calmed him by stating that I needed space and a place to stay until I thought things out. Dominic texted apologies and invitations to chat at home throughout Sunday. Only once did I say I needed time. I phoned in sick on Monday because I couldn't handle taking dentist office calls while pretending everything was fine. About 9 a.m., Valerie, Dominic's mother, called Monday morning. We've always gotten along, and she's been more supportive than my mother, who lives in Florida with husband number 3. She seemed agitated, saying Dominic had called her the night before and that I needed to know something. She asked if we could meet somewhere to chat. So I'm waiting in my car outside the coffee shop where I'm supposed to meet Valerie in 15 minutes, wondering what else to know and if my 5-year relationship is over. I never thought I'd write this. I keep looking at my engagement ring, wondering whether I should have expected this. Was I wrong, or did things shift so fast? Should I follow Valerie? How could she say anything to fix this? First, I'd like to thank everyone for their overwhelming support of my initial piece. I wasn't expecting thousands of comments. I tried to read as many as I could between weeping bouts and stress-eating emergency Oreos from my brother's pantry. I met Valerie, Dominic's mother, and I'll discuss it at the end of this update. So much has happened in the past 2 days, and I'm still processing everything. I called in sick again after publishing on Monday. I had just 2 sick days in the preceding year and sounded like death on the phone. But my supervisor was nice. I spent most of the morning in Elliot's spare room storage closet, reading your comments and organizing my thoughts. At lunchtime, Lena brought sandwiches from a deli near her hospital. Despite not eating since Sunday, I forced myself to consume a few bites. Lena softly reminded me I couldn't ignore Dominic forever. We lived together, shared accounts, and had to talk. She was right. I couldn't stay at my brother's place forever, especially since Elliot's girlfriend was coming over for dinner. I didn't want to be Taco Tuesday. Sad third wheel. I took a shower and grabbed one of Elliot's hoodies. Don't judge. It felt wonderful, and I drove home after Lena left. I practiced my speech the whole time. I would remain calm, act like an adult, and receive answers without yelling or crying. Dominic's truck was in our parking spot when I pulled in. He should have worked. My stomach knotted as I approached our second-floor apartment steps. I opened the door to find him on the couch in sweatpants, looking exhausted, surrounded by wedding planning binders I'd made over the last 8 months. Little Trader being snuggled with him, he was surprised and relieved to see me and stated he was taking personal time off. He was probably reviewing all the wedding preparations to figure out how he bungled it so badly. I stood by the door, not ready to sit next to him, and told him that my wedding plans wouldn't change his mind. We had a long, difficult conversation. He apologized again for the bar comment, calling it terrible and not believing it. He said he was trying to appear cool in front of his buddies when I asked why he would say something he didn't believe, which made me even angrier. Before the bar incident, I reminded him during dinner that he had misgivings about our wedding. Even when sober, he admitted to being anxious about a late work assignment, Paul's marriage, horror stories, and our wedding money. He didn't tell me his problems until they exploded in the worst way. As we talked, he revealed a new fear, becoming his father. Dominic rarely talked about his father, who left him at 12 after having an affair with a coworker and moving to Arizona to start a new life. Dominic had always said it didn't bother him, but he now admits he was worried about a genetic predisposition to cheat or abandon his family. I explained that he was not his father and that genetics do not affect relationships. His comment was telling. He wondered if he could pledge eternity when it seemed impossible from his childhood. He hesitated to say he had spoken with Kyler when I asked if he had told anyone else. Since Kyler joined the group, they had become closer and Kyler had relationship troubles. This explained why Kyler had called me about the bar incident. He knew Dominic's concerns. When I asked Dominic about his problems, the conversation soured. He was honest. He was scared, anxious, and unsure about marriage while loving me. He said he kept thinking about how his parents were happy until they weren't, and didn't want to put us in that situation. I wondered why he hadn't spoken up sooner. He said he was afraid I wouldn't think he loved me enough. I saw the irony. Hiding his anxieties created the situation he wanted to avoid. I inquired if his joke about my appearance was a genuine lack of interest, and he said he'd always thought I was gorgeous. He mentioned our first meeting at the housewarming party, and my green sweater, and his terrible beer pong skills. He said he made the comment out of insecurity and a desire to look in control in front of his friends, rather than stuck. I asked a crucial question as we talked. Were his doubts against marriage in general, or just marrying me? His sluggish response told me everything. He finally admitted that he was worried about marriage and commitment, but also about our long-term compatibility. This hurt more than comments about my beauty. He was still unclear if we were compatible after 5 years. He explained how we had evolved since our early 20s. My increased need for preparation versus spontaneity, and his abandoned hopes of launching a business. He asked if we had grown closer or apart. Even though I told him partnerships change, I was emotionally weary by then. I told him I needed time to think about his public humiliation, secret fears, and now our compatibility anxiety. He told us to try therapy or couples counseling, but I insisted on separation. He noticed my phone vibrating as I packed more clothes. I found 3 missed calls with everything going on. I forgot about our coffee date. Dominic looked worried after I mentioned this. My mother called crying the morning before, stating she needed to talk about something urgent. After calling her Sunday night, he replied clearly. When I asked what he had told her, he was pale and reluctant to look at me. He made vague references to their fight and his doubts, but I was dubious. When pressed, he said he couldn't explain and suggested I ask his mother. I called Valerie after leaving. She reacted instantly, worried I hadn't attended our meeting. I replied that I was with Dominic at the flat. She requested that we meet promptly since she had important news. Her voice seemed strange when I mentioned being with Dominic, which reinforced my fears that I was missing something essential. After agreeing to meet Valerie in 30 minutes, I asked Dominic what his mother knew that I didn't. Remorse and resignation filled his face when he looked up. He said he should have told me anything and suggested I go to his mother, promising to leave when I returned. I rapidly packed a week's worth of clothes, toiletries, and my laptop. Dominic told me he loved me at the door, but I said love isn't enough. Karina, Dominic's sister, called me on my way to Valerie. She was worried about Dominic and me. After hearing from Paul about the bar situation and seeing that Dominic wasn't responding to her texts when their mother was unhappy, Karina looked surprised when I told her I was meeting Valerie and asked if it was about Maria. Name struck me like a truck. What about Maria? Karina's horror and hasty retreat suggested she had accidentally revealed something significant. She apologized and recommended me to listen to Valerie, but refused to elaborate despite subsequent attempts. Valerie was waiting at a window table when I entered the coffee shop parking lot. She had red, puffy eyes. I thought what she would say would change everything. My phone buzzed with a text as I reached her table. Dominic said, "Whatever my mom tells you, please remember that I do love you. I just got scared and made terrible mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I put my phone away, breathed deeply, and sat across from Valerie. Second update. Thanks for supporting my earlier posts. Reading your comments is comforting and overwhelming. Many of them have gone unanswered, but I read them and appreciate the advice. Lena's flat is my new writing spot. I hated returning to Elliot's or our apartment after meeting Valerie yesterday. Lena's pull-out couches are slightly cozier than Elliot's storage room. Futon. Pepper, her cat, doesn't mind me bawling over my oatmeal at 2 a.m. The Valerie appointment. Where do I start? The coffee shop was packed on Tuesday afternoon. Computer using. Students filled most tables at a nearby community college after classes. Valerie received a corner booth with high backs for privacy. She changed since our monthly family dinner 3 weeks ago. Her gorgeous hair was unkempt, and she wore no makeup. Valerie has always worn mascara and lipstick in my 5 years of knowing her. This is her routine, just like others need coffee to start the day. She stood and hugged me when I came smelling like her lavender dryer sheets instead of a caramel with extra whipped cream. I requested a black coffee. It felt improper to order anything fun for this talk. After some awkward small talk, Valerie got to the point. Dominic broke down Sunday night and called her. She understood his concerns about commitment and becoming like his father, but Maria drove his behavior more immediately. I almost choked on coffee. Dominic's new project coordinator. Maria, what about the woman he mentioned briefly? Valerie hurriedly ripped a napkin into tiny pieces to explain Dominic's love for Maria. Over several months, Dominic told his mother there was no physical contact, but an emotional connection made him rethink our relationship. I sat there trying to understand this, feeling like the coffee shop was tilted, creating a timeline in my head while Valerie spoke. Maria started working with Dominic around New Year's. I briefly met her at the March corporate holiday dinner. Dominic had already changed. He was more aloof, checked his phone more, and spent more time with coworkers. What I thought was more stress from his big task was more. When I asked Valerie why she was telling me this instead of protecting her son, she cried as she explained her marriage. Dissolution became clear before. Dominic's father moved to Arizona with a coworker. There were months of alienation, harsh words, and staged disputes to create distance rather than face the truth. She left me in the dark as Dominic took the coward's way out to avoid repeating the past. The bar comment became clear, not intoxicated folly, but a subconscious attempt to harm our connection so he didn't have to make the hard decision. We chatted for over an hour. Valerie recounted how she battled to save her marriage after finding out about the affair and blamed herself for not being enough. Before I parted in the parking lot, she said, "The hardest lesson I learned was that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't, and anything in between is just delaying the inevitable." Afterward, I stared at my phone in my car for a while. Dominic sent 3 more texts, all variations on "I'm sorry" and "I love you." But Maria was not mentioned, hinting that the truth was buried. I called Lena instead of responding and begged to stay at her flat. She did not hesitate or ask questions. She simply said she was setting up the pull-out couch and would pick up dinner on her way home. Everyone needs that kind of friend in a crisis. Finally, I wrote to Dominic. "I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things tomorrow while you're at work." I blocked his phone number for the night. I wanted time to think without his explanations. On her way to Lena's, Karina called. Valerie had overheard Dominic and Paul discussing the matter last Thursday. The chat confirmed and expanded on her information. She made her brother promise to tell me the truth after the weekend. He had broken his promise. Karina's unwavering support amazed me the most despite being Dominic's sister. She supported me. My relief was profound. I was worried about losing Dominic and his family, who had become like family to me. Lena's flat was perfect that night. A neutral space where I could exist without explanation. Dining on the living room floor, her coffee table was covered in online class papers as we watched a baking competition we didn't understand. It's simple. Normalcy saved me during my emotional turmoil. I used my phone to relive 5 years of vacations, holidays, and everyday selfies with Dominic after Lena went to bed. Our engagement photos showed us smiling like lottery winners. I was mentally planning for the next day, going to the apartment while Dominic was at work packing more stuff, possibly talking to the landlord about breaking our lease, when an unknown number texted me. "Hi Margot, this is Maria. I know you have blocked Dominic. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story, which you should know. Only the 2 of us." My pulse raced as I glanced at the letter, wondering what else could be in it and why this woman would want to tell me directly. I scribbled a response after what seemed like an hour, but it was actually minutes. Where and when? 3rd update. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for their overwhelming support in my previous posts. Your comments have helped me through restless nights more than you realize. Yes, I'm alive. Sometimes they are easier. My visit with Maria went differently than expected. Probably impartial. We met at a little brunch establishment near the park. She was nervously checking her phone when I arrived. She seemed less polished and more human than at the corporate party. Her ponytail was messy, and she wore little makeup. Her unease caught my attention immediately. Shouldn't she have been more confident if she got involved with my Fiancé copyright emotionally? She kept fiddling with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. The talk presented 2 major surprises. First, Maria didn't know Dominic liked her until Paul casually mentioned it last week. She said she and Dominic worked on a project together, occasionally texting after hours, but never violating limits. According to her, she never flirted with him or promoted anything other than friendship. She showed me their work-related messaging history and the occasional meme. Nothing romantic or inappropriate. She had a 3-year boyfriend who occasionally joined them for happy hours. The second insight affected Paul. He was apparently intentionally causing trouble. Maria overheard him at work, encouraging Dominic to consider his options before settling down, calling her someone who gets Dominic better than I do. She explained that Paul had been telling everyone at work that Dominic was having second thoughts about the wedding, joking about him being trapped and missing out on his freedom. After our meeting, I felt unusually peaceful. Maria wasn't the monster I expected. She was a victim of Dominic's manipulation and frailty. Before leaving, she said, "You seem like someone who understands their worth. Don't let anyone make you doubt it." My perspective and tactics changed after the encounter. The focus shifted from Dominic and me to Paul's detrimental influence, Dominic's family, and my role in this. I emailed Karina later to organize a neutral family gathering at her place because I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic. She agreed. Fast. I remember yesterday's lunch. Her small yet pleasant flat was organized by Karina. She ordered simple pasta and salad from the Italian restaurant near her building. Valerie arrived first, then Paul. He attended because Karina insisted, and Dominic, who looked exhausted, did too. First 20 minutes were terrible. We ate pasta at Karina's dining table, talking about the weather and her new coffee table. The elephant in the room was almost eating our meal, but no one wanted to confess it. Finally, Valerie broke the silence by reiterating that we were there to face what had happened and find a solution, not to socialize. That opened the floodgates. I told Paul all I learned from Maria. Watching Paul's expression, the uncertainty and defensiveness in his face said it all. He tried to help his friend, but Karina cut him off immediately. Dominic sat calmly, staring at his upturned pasta. He confessed that Maria had been pleasant, but he had twisted it out of fear of becoming his father. Valerie recoiled at that comment. Dominic seemed embarrassed when I told the joke at the bar. He said it was his cowardice, not Maria's. Paul was teasing him about being whipped, so he shouted something mean to appear cool. Dominic says my appearance never mattered. Paul dismissed it as guy talk. But Karina reminded everyone that Dominic and I were getting married in 3 months. That simple comment, a reminder of our fast-approaching wedding, hit me hard. After sending save the dates and paying deposits, my dress was hanging in Lena's spare closet for final modifications. I subtly remarked that I no longer believed the wedding would happen. The room quieted. Dominic began to protest, but I stopped him. He stated he spent the week trying to figure out how he got here. I realized it wasn't simply Maria, that joke, or Paul's harm. Dominic was dishonest with me and himself. I said that I had ignored his lack of interest in the wedding arrangements, his increased time with Paul, and his emotional isolation. For months, I made excuses because it was easier than facing the truth. But I deserved someone who believed in me and didn't need a family intervention to figure out their feelings. Valerie and Karina said, "Shut up." When Paul made a snarky remark about my drama, Dominic said he loved me but was frightened of messing up. He already had. I said we talked for hours. There were tears yelling, especially between Karina and Paul, and hard truths. Old wounds reopened and new ones formed when everyone was emotionally exhausted at midnight. We had to cancel the wedding. Our 5-year romance ended. Not a fight or a dramatic exit, just a sense that something fundamental had broken between us. Trust. It might be rebuilt someday, but not for an October wedding. Not with Maria still working at Dominic's company. And not with that joke lingering. Karina brought me back to Lena's and said my relationship with her and Valerie hadn't altered. She stated I was still family despite Dominic's actions. After returning to Lena's apartment, I sat on the pull-out couch in the dark, realizing that 5 years had passed. The wedding had been canceled, and the future was unknown. Didn't cry right away. I made a list on my phone's notes app. Call the venue to cancel the deposit is likely gone. Return the ring. Contact guests. Relocate out of the apartment. Change relationship status on social media. Past 2 a.m. Shuffled out of her bedroom. Lena. She heard me enter and checked on me. She sat beside me in the pull-out and threw her arm around my shoulders as I told her the wedding was off. We sat like that till daylight, not talking and just living in my new craziness. Dominic texted me this morning to meet to discuss the apartment lease separating our accounts and what to do with our shared furniture. So mature, so final. Elliot also asked when he could help me pack. My brother is always practical. My mother asked if she should cancel her flight to the wedding. After hearing from one of my relatives who follows Karina on Instagram, my finger feels heavy with the ring. Twisting it unconsciously was a nervous habit I didn't realize. Nothing fancy, just a round diamond in white gold. Dominic chose it because it reflected our classic relationship. I called the venue this morning. Ironically, the coordinator was kind but firm. The deposit is non-refundable. So close to the date. $8,000 lost trips. New clothes and outings have been cut for nearly a year. My cerebral half cringes at the waist while my emotional side is indifferent about money. Karina texted me that she had found a photographer who might move our money to a future event. Valerie promised to tell relatives about the cancellation to avoid awkwardness. Small kindnesses. Afterward, Paul replied with an unapologetic tact, stating things happened for a reason and I'd find someone better. I deleted it without replying. Maria wrote me a quick message, apologizing and assuring me that nothing happened. Strangely, I trust her. Dominic's anxieties and Paul's manipulation seem to have made her collateral damage. Simple reminders like my wedding planning binder in my tote bag, our shared Spotify soundtrack for the celebration, and my laptop honeymoon research folder are the hardest. A lost future in small pieces. I went to work against Lena's advice to take a mental health day. Reddit browsing and overthinking appeared more distracting than answering phones and filling insurance claims at home. Coworkers have been surprisingly normal, either unaware or respectfully ignoring my puffy eyes and missing engagement ring. Tomorrow, Dominic and I will exchange keys and discuss the place at a coffee shop. Since my name is on the lease, he'll stay with his cousin until he leaves. Another practical discussion was about leaving a relationship. Part of me doubts this. Last month, we debated reception music and tried different cakes, separated kitchen appliances, and disputed who keeps the PlayStation. Valerie stated at dinner that endings are rarely clean or perfect. Most of the time, they're messy, sad, and complicated. She should know. After Dominic's father left, she rebuilt her life, had 2 children, and found happiness. You wouldn't believe she'd been through so much, looking at her now. Maybe there's hope. No, I'm taking things day by day. Tomorrow I'll manage the flat and money. Next week I'll start house hunting. The future after that is murky, but real. Karina texted me to meet for coffee this weekend. She said her longtime family friend, Kenzo, had offered his holiday cabin if I needed a getaway to clear my thoughts. Dominic's family's unexpected help is much appreciated. Accepting Kenzo offers up in the air. Something inside me wants to process in peace. I understand I need Lena's realistic sympathy, Elliot's protective big brother energy, Valerie and Karina's complex allegiance right now. I'll stop using my wedding countdown app. Will not pin reception, decorations, or practice. Dominic's surname signature. That future is over. But I'm hoping for something else. It's weird to write this final report from my new apartment. It's been 3 months since the family dinner that ended my engagement. 3 months of rebuilding my life in unexpected ways. Since several of you have requested an update, here it is. The good, the bad, and the unexpected. First, practicalities. After we broke up, Dominic left our shared flat within a week. Elliot and Lena helped me pack his possessions while he was at work, placing everything neatly labeled in the living room for him. It was strange to divide 5 years of shared existence into his and mine. The coffee maker he got for his birthday, the throw blanket I bought on our weekend trip to that small mountain town, and the framed photos we hung on every wall made the apartment feel hollow, like a stage set after 2 more weeks. The leasing management let me out for a month's payment to escape our relationship. Ghost in every room was worth the money. Finding a new home was harder than Pi had lawned. My single-person budget is tighter due to the bad rental market. My 1-bedroom apartment across town, farther from work, has a tiny balcony where I'm growing herbs in dollar store pots. The basil fades, but the mint grows against all odds. I saw that as a symbolic financial adjustment when planning for 1-car insurance. Streaming subscriptions and even groceries became my responsibility. I now use coupons for store brands, use a spreadsheet, and think twice before ordering takeout. Growing up lessons I never thought I'd need at 29. Marriage merchants were surprisingly accommodating. The venue withheld our deposit, but sent me a nice card wishing me happiness. The florist refunded half of our payment despite their no-refund policy. In a shocking but thoughtful move, the DJ suggested his rehab working brother. I keep the engagement ring in its box in my dresser. Dominic advised me to keep or sell it because returning it would be bad karma. Not sure what to do with it. I sometimes forget it's there, and other times I open the box and stare at it, wondering how something so small could have had so much potential. Social media had its own horror. I waited 2 weeks to update my relationship status to avoid questions. I completed it at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Well-meaning friends asked what happened. Distant relatives prayed, and former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly entered my direct conversations with a phony fear that felt like interest. I wrote a brief, ambiguous comment about mutual decisions and requested privacy, then turned off notifications and threw my phone across the couch. Later, I posted a photo of my new apartment keys with a caption, "New Beginnings." It got fewer likes than my engagement announcement, but it felt more authentic. Since the breakup, we've talked about practical issues like mail that arrived at the wrong place, the shared cloud storage account we forgot to separate, and returning a borrowed air fryer to his sister. Each conversation was polite but tense. Like acquaintances forced to make small talk in an elevator, he still works for the same job as friends with Paul, though Karina says they had a falling out recently, and Dominic contacted me last month and asked if we could meet. We hadn't seen each other since the key exchange at the apartment, and I was curious about his goals. We met in a coffee shop near my new apartment, as Lena half-jokingly suggested. He was leaner, had larger circles under his eyes, and wore a shirt I didn't recognize. After 10 minutes of stiff, small talk about work and the weather, he took out a journal and said, "I've been seeing someone," and my heart stuttered before he said, "a therapist." The notebook was part of his therapy, daily reflections on patterns and habits he wanted to change. He'd been reflecting on his relationship with his father, his friendship with Paul, and how he treated me. He didn't ask for forgiveness or recon. "I should have done this years ago," he said. "Maybe things would have been different." He was the most self-aware I'd ever seen, and I hoped treatment would help him. Not for my sake. That ship has sailed, but because carrying so much unresolved familial pain was exhausting. "I'm glad," he said. "They need good people in their lives." One of the oddest parts of this separation has been keeping in touch with Dominic's family. Valerie texts me weekly, usually with hilarious memes or garden updates. Karina and I get breakfast every other Sunday at this small kaffa copyright midway between our apartments. I'd like to think this tragedy has given me a profound awakening, allowing me to rediscover myself. Some days, I feel emancipated, relieved that I didn't marry someone who could harm me so carelessly. Other days, when my hot water heater broke or I couldn't reach something on the high shelf, Dominic would have retrieved it for me. I miss the practical benefits of collaboration. I've also started therapy, not because of the breakup, but because it made me realize how much I compromised myself in that relationship, how many red flags I'd ignored because they were wrapped in familiarity, and how much of myself I'd sacrificed to accommodate Dominic's needs and insecurities. My therapist suggested I restore some of my lost self. Dating again seems far off. Even though my coworkers have started suggesting I meet this great guy, they know I'm still learning how to be comfortable in my own company. The most unexpected resulted from canceling our honeymoon. We'd planned a 10-day trip to the coast and rented a little home with a veranda overlooking the water. Then Lena suggested something radical. "Go on the trip alone. You've never traveled alone," she said. "Maybe it's time." 10 days alone in a lovely home designed for two. Sounded like the start of a tragic indie film. But the more I thought about it, the more appealing it seemed. I could wake up whenever I wanted, explore without limits, and read a book in one sitting. So I'm going to a honeymoon cabin alone next week. I've packed 3 paperbacks, downloaded several podcasts, and bought a new bikini for comfort rather than appearance. My mother thinks I'm crazy. Elliot offered to come with me, but I declined. Karina suggested I use a dating app to see who's out there. Perhaps, but probably not. I went grocery shopping the other day when our song played over the store speakers. 3 months ago, I would have hidden in the frozen food department, holding back tears. This time, I felt only a faint ache, as if I was pressing on a bruise that had mostly healed. Progress. Not perfect. I'll be honest. My new apartment's shower has an unusual temperature fluctuation. I killed another basil plant yesterday, and I still occasionally text Dominic about something funny before realizing we don't do that anymore. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.